MS Now's Fallon Gallagher was inside that courtroom. Also here, Rachel Van Landingham, retired lieutenant colonel from the U.S. Air Force, former JAG, and professor of law at Southwestern Law School. Good to have both of you there. So, Fallon, take us inside that courtroom. What stood out to you in these arguments?
Yeah, Chris, the key question during today's arguments was really whether those First Amendment restrictions that can apply to active duty service members also apply to retirees like Senator Kelly. Now, at this point, a lower court has preliminarily ruled that they do not apply. And this Court of Appeals, this three-court panel, a majority of them appear inclined to side with that lower court and with Senator Kelly. Now, Hegseth and the Pentagon have argued that those restrictions do apply, that the senator engaged in, that he was counseling disobedience, in their words, when he engaged in that video where he told service members that they can refuse to obey illegal orders. Now, Senator Kelly has said that the Department of Defense is acting in what they're calling textbook retaliation. And I want you to take a listen to what he had to say outside of court.
According to them, anytime a retired veteran says something that the Secretary of Defense doesn't like, they can be punished. So the people who have given the most in service to this country wouldn't be free to say what they believe. It's absurd and it's outrageous. It is an outrageous violation of our constitutional rights.
Now, inside the courtroom, the judges had really sharp questionings for the Department of Justice. One of the judges repeatedly reminded him that at West Point and the Naval Academy, it is textbook teaching to all cadets that you can refuse illegal orders. That was a current that came throughout this entire hearing. And there was another interesting line of questioning towards the end where one of the judges, one of the sharpest questioners during the entire hearing, had a line of questioning to the Department of Defense's attorney, where she asked him repeatedly if the senator wants to be able to speak freely and practice his First Amendment rights, would he have needed to discharge himself from the military as opposed to retire? And the Department of Defense attorney couldn't answer that question in a straight way that satisfied the judge. Now, there was no ruling from here today, but we expect a written opinion in the coming weeks. Chris?
Thank you so much for that. Well, Rachel, Senator Kelly told Punchbowl News, quote, "My expectation is we win in the circuit court, and I also expect them to probably appeal again, and it might go to the Supreme Court." Based on what you heard today, what do you think?
Well, I think Senator Kelly is right. I do think there's a strong chance this will go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will resoundingly side with Senator Kelly and the millions of military retirees like me that maintain our First Amendment right to speech. Senator Kelly is a mere pensioner, as the Supreme Court has called military retirees, receiving pay for his past service. So while military members do have restricted First Amendment liberties while on active duty, of course, because of the nexus to good order and discipline and obedience to command, military retirees are civilians who enjoy the panoply of First Amendment protections, and they should. We need to hear from our veterans. And what the Secretary of Defense is trying to do now really risks chilling the speech of millions of individuals who have honorably served their country.
So indeed, Rachel, central to today's argument, what this ruling could mean for military retirees. And if the judge sides with the Defense Department and Secretary Hegseth, you mentioned the chilling effect it could have on free speech. But for people who believe it's important for them to stand up for what they believe in, automatically they lose their rank and pay?
Well, the Secretary of Defense would have to go through some kind of procedure, such as the military code of the Uniform Code of Military Justice, military criminal law, technically does still apply to military retirees like myself, but no court has ever found that the unique military speech crimes apply to us. So he would have to try to court-martial each one of us that has said things such as words contemptuous against elected officials. I have spoken about President Trump in words that are quite contemptuous. So he would have to actually court-martial me, right? Because that's the only venue. But what he's trying to do against Senator Kelly, he threatened to court-martial him, but there really is no probable cause that he committed a crime. Senator Kelly did the same thing I did as a professor and lawyer and military officer at the United States Air Force Academy, which is trained cadets that you have a legal duty to disobey unlawful orders. It's not just that you can, it's that you must disobey unlawful orders that you know that are unlawful. And so, the idea that Senator Kelly even committed any kind of military crime is ludicrous. So what the secretary is trying to do is instead to take a backdoor maneuver and reduce his retirement pay, which is clearly not allowed by federal law, because retirement pay is based purely on conduct while on active duty. And so Secretary Hegseth is going to lose either way. But we do need the courts to continue their strong and staunch defense of the rule of law and of First Amendment protections for retirees.